Hello, anglers, and welcome to. Do we still want to call it the harvest season, or is it now the fishing season?
Well, I think this is the fishing season of the harvest season.
Oh, well, all right. We're harvest. I mean, fish farms are a thing. Hatcheries. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin, and this
And
is
I'm Johnny.
yeah, my co-host Johnny here. We are. I guess this is the first, if I understand the order correctly, of a very special. I think it's gonna be a month, roughly. I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
fishing month.
Yeah, fishing month. Yeah, it's a very special month. We are taking a break from the usual cottage core and farming. Well, it's more of like a tangent than something completely different. We won't be covering news. Partly because Al will be on vacation during all this time, so he won't be editing. um, uh, but yeah, so this kicks off our month where we talk about fishing. Which we've always kind of joked about behind the scenes, but I don't know, I wanted to pull the trigger and really do it. Um, there's a lot of fishing in a lot of these cottagecore games and gaming in general, as we'll talk about today. So there we have lots to say about it.
Yeah,
Um,
lots to say about fishing. And just a brief reminder before we get too into the deep water here. Transcripts are
uh,
available in the show notes and on the website. But I'm really excited to get stuck into fishing month. I have opinions about fishing in cottagecore games.
yeah, like oh boy, I mean it's not just cottagecore fishing mini games are like everywhere. Speaking of which, I think we should say that today on this episode we're specifically going to be discussing uh fishing mini games and listing some of our favorites and least favorites, and I think we're going to try to uh determine the harvest season official best fishing mini game of all
We're not
time,
going to
at least
try.
until now.
We will endorse a fishing minigame as the best fishing minigame in cottagecore games.
All right. Um, but before that, Johnny, what have you been up to?
What have I been up to? I have been playing like the most anti-cottagecore game possible, I think, and I've been farming the demons of hell in Diablo 4. I love Diablo. I was really into Diablo 3 even when people really hated Diablo 3, and I was still really into Diablo 3 when everyone got on board with that game. And so I'm really enjoying Diablo 4. It's just a really good action adventure, kill all the things on the screen sort of game. I'm not super deep into it yet, I haven't had a ton of time, but I am really enjoying it. It's just a good one of those games. If you like one of those games, you probably already know and are probably already playing Diablo 4. And if you don't like those games, it's not going to make you like this sort of game anymore, but it's excellent.
Yeah. That's cool. I've never played a Diablo game, but I hear this one's good.
It's
Um,
very good.
yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, good on you. Like I said, I've never played, so I can't speak to it. But I mean, you it. I think it's like what's on the box is what you get, right? There's a demon, go kill it. So
Very
good,
much.
good on you.
Go farm loot, look at gear, be disappointed that it's, the number isn't slightly higher than it's number go up sort of game, right? Just
Yeah, just I know I get it. I played I'm not play the game though that type of game too much, but surprisingly, well, not surprisingly, my brother Calvin, he's a big Minecraft fan since he was like of that generation or whatever. So he played Minecraft Legends, which I understand is of the basically the same genre, just with the Minecraft skin.
so
And yeah,
it's just worse because it's got the Minecraft skin.
well, I mean, it's not
Look, as
even
as a as
best
a
of the
slightly
Minecraft
aged
skin.
gamer, I love poo pooing new
Yeah,
games that all of the
yeah,
kids are
no,
into.
yeah. No, I get you. But yeah, so you just do runs and get loot at the end, right? Is that how it works?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. All right. Yeah, I get it. No, it's a satisfying loop. Like you said, get a bigger number and go back in to get the bigger number.
Yeah, but that's Diablo. What have you been up to, Kiv?
Oh, I have been very busy in my personal life, a lot of out towning, so my gaming time has been limited, and so I've been doing a lot of the mobile gaming lately. Pokemon Masters is Pokemon Masters, my gotcha game of choice. Still no, they introduced those two people from Legends, was Adamant and Iridia, the two clan leaders. This is the most I've spent, like not actual money, but like the in-game currency on pulls, and still haven't pulled one of them. But aside from the hopeless gambling addiction, I've been playing Marvel Snap, which is, hey, it's really good, but I mean, like really good right now. It's really fun. Is I don't feel oppressed by other decks. You can play kind of whatever you want right now, it feels like, and have fun.
You definitely can. Have you been playing the conquest mode?
Yeah, so they introduced this new mode called Conquest, where basically it's more than just a best of one, because usually just you play against one player one game and that's it. But now there's like this try to win X number of points in a couple of games. I have played it. I have mixed feelings on it. I think it's a cool thing they tried, but the problem is you get locked into a number of games with the 12 cards you have, and you kind of can't counter anything, right? So if you're up against a deck that just completely crushes you, that's it. There's just nothing you can do. Just quit as soon as you can.
You can play
Um,
better or play a better deck. That's the
just
that's
quit
the
better.
that's the counter. No, it's I kind of get where you're coming from, but I think Conquest
Yeah,
changes the way that you play Snap quite a bit. When you play on ladder and it's best of one,
yeah,
you can be very all in on the strategy of your deck and not build in a
yeah.
lot of that flexibility because you just you might run into those decks fairly infrequently. Whereas a mode like Conquest encourages decks that are have a wider variety of counters sort of naturally built into them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been playing the good stuff deck.
Yeah,
And
what
part of the
made
reason
of
I
me?
really like that deck for the format is it has a bunch of counters already in it. It has Shang-Chi, it has Enchantress, so it's got a number of counters sort of already built in, which gives it a lot more flexibility and to play in
Yeah,
Conquest mode.
yeah, that makes sense. Um, I know good stuff is well the good stuff, but I haven't gotten to yet because I've been having fun with other dumb decks. There's that Across the Spider Verse movie is out, so they're doing a lot of Spider Man people in the game right now, and I'm playing a deck with a lot of Spider Man people. Silk is cool. If you don't know comics, look up Silk from the comics because she's cool.
I don't
Um,
know Silk, but I'm a big fan of the card.
she's really cool. She's like Chinese American version of Peter Parker. Anyways, so that's Marvel Snap. Other than that, I've been playing Octopath Traveler, just that classic Square Enix Final Fantasy, or basically Final Fantasy uh, archetypal good JRPG with the turn-based and classes, and it's a game I can turn on and grind and turn my brain off and enjoy. Um, but yeah, that's all I've been up to gaming wise.
How far into
Not too too.
Octopath Traveler are you? It was one of those games that I tried when it first came out, and it
Yeah,
kind of just didn't quite grab me.
yeah.
But I didn't get that far into it either.
Actually, that's a great question because so there are 8 characters, hence the Octo in the name. And they each have their own little storyline, right? And like there's chapters to each story. And basically, the way game structures it, you do chapter one of everyone, then do chapter two of everyone, chapter three, and then chapter four is the final level. And hey, I have reached the chapter four, um, for basically everyone. So I'm at the quote unquote end game, so I'm finally finding the final towns, the final parts of the map, and it's I mean I still really enjoy it. It's somewhat challenging, at least a lot of the bosses and the fights are. Um, a lot of them are kind of endurance tests and structuring your party well, and I mean. If you like that type of battle system, because that's really what it amounts to, a really incredible, well polished battle system, you'll enjoy Octopath. But I hear the sequel, Octopath 2, actually improves a lot of the weak areas of the first game, so much that it probably invalidates the first game. So if you haven't played Octopath, just play Octopath 2. You won't be missing anything.
Cool. Yeah, I think I got through some of like the first act with most of the characters, and kind of bounced off about then. But I think it's one of those things with these, JRPGs, is that it's one of the genres that I feel is most sort of holding on to the nostalgia feel, particularly around grinds and some of the strategy, in a way that I think is really good, and it sort of differentiates the genre from some of the more modern RPGs in a way that I really like. But it also makes these games a real time suck, right?
Yeah, well, yes and no, because on the one hand, a lot of the battles are grindy, and like a boss battle can easily take you 20, 30 minutes. I'll say 20, 30 might be a bit long, but either way. But the kicker is, like, since you're just going through and beating all these random encounters, like, you don't feel like you have to invest a lot of time, right? Like, okay, I'm just gonna play this for 10 minutes and just try to read go through this area. I don't know. Just go through a few battles, level up some guys. It still it's not super plot driven, so you won't feel like, oh, I don't remember what I'm doing or whatever. You can just kind of jump in and play for a little bit every day. But I mean, over I say that, but I have like 80 hours in the game, so it is a big time suck over. uh,
Nice.
but I don't hear that from anyone. You're all playing Tears of the Kingdom. But so yeah, that's what I've been up to. Mobile gaming, Octopath. Now, like I said, we're not doing any news, so let's dive right on in to these fish infested waters and talk about fishing. Ooh.
Woo!
um,
And I thought a good place to start would be a little bit of the history of fishing mini games, and I don't know too much about it, but one of the things that I came across when I was doing some research for this episode is that a lot of the desire and the impetus for fishing mini games came out of Japan, because it's such a strong element of the Japanese economy and culture. Obviously, being an island nation, fishing is a huge component of their way of life, which is just something that I'd never really considered before, but makes total sense when
right?
you read it.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Like me too. I never thought about it, but yeah, of course. They're yeah, and so much of their culture, what they eat's all around the sea and fishing and all that good stuff. Yeah, we'll definitely be dropping the link in the show notes for this article from the Washington Post. It's definitely worth a read. We'll be referencing it. But yeah, that history. Like I'm gonna be paraphrasing slash taking out of context quotes from this article, but um, fishing has been pretty prevalent in gaming from let's see here. It says like the first one is 77, a text-based adventure on based on fishing. Um, 3 years later, so that would be what, like 1980. We got a fishing derby game from Activision. That's really old. That's older than like most genres. Which is pretty crazy to think about. At least in terms of gaming, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's pretty wild. It's just
yeah,
a much longer history than I guess I would have assumed. But
yeah,
it does make sense because it's at the basics of it is a relatively simple mechanic, which probably explains why it still persists as a mini game in so many games today, right? Because it's potentially relatively simple to implement.
yep, yeah, definitely. That's something this article that goes on to talk about for sure. Because like, uh, I like again, just going off this article, Zelda was apparently the first fishing mini game. Link's Awakening, I didn't realize that, but that, again, of course, going a Japanese game makes a lot of sense. That the developers did there, but like, I just think about the history of fishing mini, or my own personal history, and like, wow, like, yeah, it's always kind of been there. I would be surprised to hear someone. Well, I guess it kind of depends on what you kind of games you play, right? Because if you only play racing games, you're not playing fishing mini games. But if you're a fan of this show, or maybe someone who enjoys gaming on perhaps a wider scale, maybe not just a casual phone gamer. I'm sure people who played, multi-hour games, they've had some experience with fishing games, um, or mini games, and it's just
Oh,
really fascinating
absolutely.
to think about
Yeah.
the like wide history.
And it
Um,
wasn't until I started thinking about this episode that I really considered the range of games that fishing is in, because it's obviously super prevalent in cottagecore games, but equally it's in games like Hades, right? It's in roguelites now.
Monster
You've got your
Hunter.
big Monster Hunter. You've got your big open world games like Red Dead Redemption and Final Fantasy 16, 15.
I think
That
all
had
of them, Final Fantasy, insert whatever, you'll find fishing of some kind.
Oh yeah, but one of the more recent ones that had such a good fishing mini game that they
Yes,
did a whole
I mean,
spin-off game based on.
yeah, 15, yeah, 15. Uh, yeah, 15. Like that, the protagonist Noctis, voiced by Ray Chase, who uh viewer listeners may or may not know from another episode. Uh, he loved fishing. The there's an in-game quote. He's the Prince of Lucius, which is like the fictional country, but he's the king of fishing. And yeah, they did a whole VR spin-off game for it. Yeah, that was really fun. Yeah, FF15, lots of fishing there.
So,
Um,
Kev, before we dive into the mechanics of fishing,
yeah,
I have a question. In general, would you say you are a fan of fishing mini games?
I'll say yes. Yes. What about you, Johnny?
I'm going to say no. And the reason I say no is kind of on the basis of that conversation that we've just had, right?
Uh-huh.
Fishing is everywhere. It's too much fishing. It's To me, it feels a little bit played out, and it's one of those things, particularly in the
Uh-huh.
context of cottagecore games. Now, when I see fishing, I kind of just start to roll my eyes a little bit and like, can we try something else? Maybe not to go too meta, but I feel like fishing has maybe jumped the shark a little bit in terms of being a mechanic in cottagecore games, where it's one of those things that has become such a staple of the genre that I worry that a lot of devs now are including fishing in their game without really thinking about what does this add to the game. Does it add anything meaningful? There are some games that absolutely do add some things that are, does add something meaningful or something that makes sense. But there's equally a number of games where I just look at it and go, but why? What is this
Yep.
really adding to your world? Other than the world happened to have water, and so you logically thought, well, let's put fishing in.
Yep. Um, I totally agree with you. But before I dive into more into that, because there's some interesting thoughts in the article about that. Here's another counter question for you. Have you fished in real life? Do you enjoy fishing in real life if you have?
I have fished in real life. I live in New Zealand, which is an island nation, so fishing
Uh-huh.
is also pretty big here.
Okay.
Personally, though, I'm not really into fishing that much. I like going on fishing trips where other people can fish and I can sit on the other end of the boat and read a book. I much prefer to be on the cooking end. I'm really happy if other people want to go on a fish. I will take the fish and happily cook it up.
Oh yeah, that's the good stuff.
But the actual act of fishing is I'm not super into. The one caveat, the one sort of fishing I would like to try and haven't tried yet is river angling. You know, where you get in the big waders and stand in the river with the fly fishing rod and do some proper fly fishing. I think that might be
Yeah, when the fish
a sort of
can
fishing that I could get into.
jump up and slap you in the face. Yeah, good times. Um, okay, see, this is interesting because, hmm, I I grew up by the coast here in the United States, out in California. I didn't fish myself that much, but my uncle was a big fisher, and my dad liked to go to the beach, so I spent a lot of time by the beach. There's a fishing pier I have fond memories of, and just generally speaking, I like the ocean and, well, waters in general and the critters inside it. Just today I went on a jog and I was just admiring like this huge fish I saw in this pond. But yeah, that's interesting. Um, I wonder how those, or just in general, like I'm interested to see like the correlation of people's personal histories and their appreciation of fishing mini games or distaste for them. Um, but going back to the game part of it. Uh, so you were okay. So yes, I fully agree with you that I think too many cottage cores are putting fishing in. Um, but it's interesting to think why, from a developer standpoint, because this article talks about it. And I'll let you speak about it, Johnny, since you read it a bit more.
Yeah, I think so in the article that's being referenced, there's a few quotes from the Spiritfarer creative director,
I
oh,
like that guy.
Nicholas Nicholas Guerin. It's probably a horrible butchering of the pronunciation. But he kind of talks about fishing games being a nice chore, which is a really interesting point, right? Because I think that makes total sense in the context of a big sort of action adventure game like a Final Fantasy or Red Dead Redemption, or even in the context of Hades, right? Where fishing is like this nice little mental break from whatever it is that you're doing. But it's really interesting in the context of a cottagecore game where the whole game is kind of nice chores. And
Right?
so I think in the context of cottagecore games, it seems to be a little bit more of maybe there's just a expectation or a default setting that we include fishing, but also one of the things that's referenced or that Nicholas references is the fact that maybe it's a little bit of sort of the creative competition between developers or game designers to show this is our take on fishing and the fishing mechanic, and here's our attempt at doing it really, really well, which I think is interesting. And maybe we can start to segue this a little bit into talking to some of the mechanics, because I think Spiritfarer is one of the games that does fishing pretty well, in my estimation. I think the way the rod breaking sort of mechanic works. We've got the stress testing. It's the right balance of it feeling enough like a mini game, but not being excessively difficult. And Spiritfarer would be a really weird game to not have fishing, given that the entire game takes place on a
It
boat.
would, right? um, yeah, no, excuse me, I totally agree. Uh, it's, I, it's really interesting to peel back, like, why I enjoy fishing mini games and like looking at these, these thoughts from developers on why they're put in. Because like you said, again, it's a nice chore, right? And like I said, I like fish. So, like for instance, Animal Crossing, I like fishing because I like finding all the sea creatures and putting them in the museum. Um, but like the actual mechanics, like because right, that's that's the other component. The actual gameplay, quote unquote, for the fishing has to be enjoyable, or whatever, right? And there's some that like. So I think about I'm gonna bring up Roots of Pacha, which I've talked about at length and played recently at length. The fishing there maybe doesn't add too much overall. Again, it feels kind of like just a staple, but the gameplay, quote unquote, part of it is so. I find it so refreshing that I really enjoy that minigame just because of the gameplay part of it. Again, at least
So,
in the
so maybe
spectrum.
what is the Roots of Pacha fishing minigame?
Okay, so what it does is it brings up like this circular pool, like you're looking down at the fish and see their shadows, right? And you're kind of with your cursor, you're following the fish, and you a little meter builds up, and then you push the button when it's at the appropriate length. But the fish will like start to notice you, and you have to back off. And essentially, it's trying to emulate like a type of spear fishing because this is, Stone Age. They don't have fishing rods. So it's like that you're following the fish in the water and waiting for the right moment to catch it or strike at it or whatever. Um, and I found that so novel because it's not just a timing thing, it's a movement based thing, both in terms of like you're moving your cursor and like how they're presenting it. And it's not just your everyday fishing rod timing based mini game. And it fits with the theme of the Stone Age so well. Like, yeah, that's how those Stone Age people probably fish to survive. They can't go to the store to buy, dinner or whatever, so they have to fish to get their food. So even though, like, I don't remember a single fish in that game because they gave them all weird names, I still really enjoy that mini game just because it fit the game so well and the little gameplay of it was so different.
Yeah, that sounds really good, and it sounds really novel. And I think that's, when I think about what I want from fishing mini games and cottagecore games, that sounds like exactly it. It makes sense in the world and the context that's being set. It's a very novel approach. And you sort of touched on it briefly, but a lot of the fishing mini games are sort of these timing based mini games, and they're sort of the range of and probably what I would put more down the simple end of the spectrum. And this is often for me the category where it feels like it's sort of the most tacked on. And one of the games that I'll sort of use as a reference point is Disney Dreamlight Valley,
Oh,
where fishing is in that game, and it's a very simple, timing based thing. The only times if I fail are when I, start checking my phone in the middle of the fishing mini game, or I get like briefly distracted. But it's a very generous sort of timing based mini game. But
yeah,
overall, fishing doesn't add a huge amount to that game,
yeah,
other than it's you need to go and fish certain things up for quests. But it's more these things exist, the quests and the reason to interact with fishing exist because fishing exists. It doesn't feel like fishing is this crucially important part of what's happening in Disney Dreamlight Valley, which is all about interacting with characters and Disney characters
yep.
in a cottagecore setting. And the other game that you referenced right at the start of the conversation, which has a timing element, is Animal Crossing.
Hmm.
And the what I like about Animal Crossing fishing is the collection aspect of it,
Yep,
but the fishing minigame itself is just unbelievably tedious. The combination of needing to get the direction exactly right with the
yep.
sort of just boring wait to press A version
Hmm.
of it. I don't think the fishing minigame in Animal Crossing is particularly good or interesting.
That, yeah, yeah. Like, I agree with you on paper. It's definitely just the slot machine of fishing games. Um, but I still like it though because the collection, like you said. Um, okay, but I want to go back to one step here to the Disney Dreamlight Valley. I got two comments on that. First, what you said there reminds me of wildflowers. Hey, Kevin mentioning wildflowers. Reset the clock. Uh, I don't think the fishing there adds a lot. Because it's just pretty much like what you described. Very generous timing. Um, and you fish up your average, nothing special fish. And what's disappointing is that there's these magical areas in wildflowers, right? Because there's witchcraft and the magical forest area. But there's only one type of magical fish, which I found to be very disappointing. Um, Possibly one of the biggest disappointments in the game. I think they really missed an opportunity to add a bunch of magical fish to do all sorts of potions and whatnot. Um, so yeah, no, I definitely understand what you're saying there. But the second comment I have for Disney Dreamlight Valley, and here's the important. This is what makes or breaks it for me. Can you fish up flounder, as in the character, not the type of fish?
You couldn't last time I played, and
Darn it! It
I'm
fails.
pretty sure they're not going to let you fish up flounder.
It
That's
it fails. That's what's the point. I want to call up Nemo. Darn it!
yeah. I don't know that that's going to be happening in the game.
What's the point? Oh,
uh, so
okay.
what about the slightly more involved fishing mechanics? Like I'm thinking of Stardew Valley as sort of the
Hmm.
quintessential example of a slightly more in depth mini game where you're having to keep the sort of fish in the green zone in order to reel it in.
Um, I like those on paper. I like I think the Stardew team or Concerned Ape or whoever was said, okay, everyone knows what Animal Crossing fishing is like. Let's make it a little more interesting. And I think that's a good idea. I don't think Stardew specifically does it well. But Spiritfarer, I think, is a good example of that, right? Where it's the fish is tugging on it. There's essentially a green zone. You don't see the bar, but there's a green zone and tells you when the fish is gonna, break the line or whatever. Um, so I do appreciate some of those. They're I think because this is kind of the middle of the spectrum, right? It's not just a one button push fishing and it's not a full fishing simulator. This I think is the most mixed bag of uh of quality, or at least for me personally, how I enjoy them. But I mean, on paper, I do like the idea of trying to make the fishing more interesting. Again, Roots of Patch, I think, really, really knocks it out of the park. Spirit Fair, I really enjoyed. But there's some that aren't great, like Stardew. What about you?
I could not agree more. I think Stardew Valley fishing is just an abomination. It's so bad. It's not fun, and I think one of the worst things about it is it's the sort of fishing mini game that kind of gets easier over time, and in order to balance it, there are some fish that are really easy to catch and they're kind of boring, and then the hard fish kind of just bounce around all over the space, and it's just like it's so frustrating to try and catch it. It's like once you catch the, fish for whether it's for, the full collection log or for the community center and you finally get that one fish, my instinctive response is, thank God I don't have to do that again, right?
Oh
And
gosh, yes.
if that's how as a player you are responding to a game mechanic, that's a sign that that is a bad game mechanic, right? If you're like,
Yep.
wow, thankfully I've done that and now I never have to do that thing again, it's a sign that it's not great. And yes,
Yep.
I really don't enjoy the fishing in Stardew Valley. I enjoyed it in Spiritfarer. For me, that was sort of the right level. It was necessary to progress some elements of the story, but like you said,
Mm-hmm.
the reeling in mechanic, it's kind of got that green zone effect, but it happens in a much more natural way, a way that's much more integrated with the world. It's not a pop up that happens on screen
Yep.
like so many fishing mini games are, where it's some weird pop up and then keep a thing in a thing style mechanic. So for me, that's a pretty great example of a fishing mini game that I think really works, and it's not something you have to do all of the time either. You can do it if you want, but it's not like a necessary thing to really progress too much in the game.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree for sure. Um, and I guess there aren't many examples, but there's the far end of the spectrum, like Spiritfarer on steroids. Have you ever played like any serious fishing simulators or more in-depth fishing mini games?
Not in the cottagecore genre, but the one I always think of is the fishing minigame in Red Dead Redemption 2. So that's one where you're sort of actively pulling your rod, against the fish. You've got to reel in at certain times, let go at certain times, kind of like the Spiritfarer one. So it's kind of that next step up, and it's probably not at the far end of the full fishing simulator, but it's incorporating multiple mechanics where you're reeling, you're pulling the rod in a certain direction, you can do a hard yank and all sorts of things. I haven't seen it in a cottagecore game. I'm
I
not sure
haven't
that I
either.
would want to see it in a in a cottagecore game unless it was a sort of very specifically fishing based
Yeah, I was
cottagecore
about to say
game.
that's what we. Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't really gotten that yet. It feels like we're overdue for a very fishing based cottagecore game. Um, yeah, let's. I want to see that. But I mean, I haven't played Red Dead, but I have played Sonic Frontiers, and hey, Sega, they made Sega Bass Pro Fishing, so guess what? They can make a darn good fishing mini game with Big the Cat. They actually made him cool in that game. Oh, I will reference Big the Cat in every single one of these fishing episodes. I will not be stopped. Okay, but I think that more or less covers the gamut of the kinds of fishing games. Um, So let's see here. What?
Well, let's talk about the reward system, right? So
Oh,
what do you actually
yes.
get out of fishing? Because this is where I think this is one of those things. It's slightly different from the mechanics, and one
Yeah,
of the
good
things
point.
that I found referenced in a few places that I found really interesting is there was a bit of comparison drawn between fishing mini games and loot boxes. And the idea being that, often in fishing mini games, like part of it is like, what fish am I actually getting out? And you don't know until you complete the activity. And that's sort of triggering the same spot in your brain that's like, well, I'm looking for the rare fish or the big fish or whatever it is. And when that was mentioned, like it made sense to me, primarily in the context of a game like Animal Crossing, right, where you're going
Yep.
around hunting for those big fish spots, and then you go and reel in, maybe it's the shark spot, and you reel in the sunfish, and you're annoyed because you're really after the great white or whatever it is. Like I was like maybe that is the thing about fishing minigames and why they're kind of quite good is because they do have that loot boxy element. In every other aspect of a cottagecore game, you pretty much know what you're getting out, but fishing is that sort of blind box element of randomness that can be brought in a really easy way, in a way that makes sense in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. Yeah. No, it's man. Seeing that comparison to loot boxes or the Pavlovian button, like oh that was rough to hear because I totally see it now. I enjoy Animal Crossing, but it's the fishing. But it's totally just the slot machine. I just like pushing the button to get the cool thing. um.
And you're probably going through the same thing I went through. Like when I first heard that comparison, I just had a real moment of like, oh my god, the way I have responded to fishing in Animal Crossing is kind of like someone that keeps losing on the slot machine, right? You're trying to fish
Yeah.
up that one fish before the season ends, and you're just like actively running around, really angry, and like kind of frustrated at this cute, cozy game because you're not getting that one fish. It's just like I feel really, really attacked.
Yep. Yep. I'm tagged in this post and I don't like it.
Yep.
um but that said though, like but the fish are so cool, the reward's so nice, right? Pulling up your first shark or filling up that museum. I love it. I love it. I love sea creatures, so uh
No, it
I
is.
don't know.
It is great, and it's one of the things about Animal Crossing, and it's why ultimately the fishing still works. Is there's fishing in terms of the mechanic and what you get when you feel when you pull it out, but then there's also the so what do you actually get out of the fish, right? What do they mean in the context of the rest of the game? Because it's not just fishing as a thing that you do and then it's done. And like you said with Animal Crossing, I love filling up the museum and walking around and seeing. All of the fish in there, and
Yeah.
outside of that, fish are a relatively good moneymaker. So that's why I really like the. Ultimately, on balance, I think fishing in Animal Crossing is okay, versus something like Stardew Valley, where it's like, yeah, you need the fish to complete some community bundles and to complete some stuff, and they kind of used a little bit in cooking, but cooking isn't like some majorly essential thing to do in Stardew Valley. And outside of that, it's kind of terrible, right? It's a terrible moneymaker. It doesn't really help you achieve anything else. It's kind of just feels like tacked on in this way that's kind of needed from a content perspective, but it
Yeah.
feels very disjointed from everything else that happens in Stardew Valley.
Absolutely, which again, yeah, I guess which feeds into why I'm not fond of the Stardew fishing for that exact reason, right? Yeah, like I can't think of a reason aside from the filling out the collection, like you said, and thank God I never have to do it again. Aside from that, like I don't can't remember like enjoying fishing particularly at Stardew at all. Or catching anything. Like I don't remember any exciting moments for me. Um, but yeah, no, and and again, gonna bring it Roots of Pacha. It's interesting because the rewards. It's a good money maker, so that's why I do it. Kind of like Animal Crossing in Roots of Pacha. But I don't care about the creatures at all, which is so interesting to me that it doesn't deliver like Animal Crossing, but I still enjoy it because of the mechanics. It's 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 fascinating. Think about all these different aspects of these little mini games that can be adjusted. They're kind of like I like the reward, but not the mechanic, or vice versa, and whatnot. And how they all come together. Um,
And that's such a fascinating point because how many fish do you think you now know about because of Animal Crossing?
So many. Like, nobody on Earth knew what an ocean sunfish was before Animal Crossing. And now,
Right?
like, yeah, no,
And even
it's
little things, right? Like the puns, everybody loves to
oh,
like mock the puns a little bit, but the amount of
the game likes to
um,
mock the puns.
right? But it's such a great way of like, I'm never gonna like forget the sea bass or maybe more
Yep,
of a C plus. Like it's just
yep,
so good and it sticks in your mind. And it's funny. I've been getting a little bit into cryptic crosswords the last few months.
uh-huh.
And one of the things that's weird about cryptic crosswords is the random areas of knowledge that it really relies on. And there's those times where, there's a clue about fish. And I would say that most of the time I get it, it's because I've played Animal Crossing and I know
Right?
that weird fish because of that game.
Oh, um, yeah, it's it's amazing the impact Animal Crossing has had on our generation's like knowledge of sea creatures. Um, but and which in itself is a reward. Like I not only do I like like I get again biased here because I actually enjoyed sea creatures in real life. But like when you go into the museum, they have little plaques you can read, and you learn stuff about sea creatures and the different animals, the insects and whatnot. And I find that fascinating. Um,
Yeah,
for such a simple, mechanically simple mini game, they give you a lot of rewards from that, which is why I think Animal Crossing fishing has still remained pretty popular, I would say overall.
agree. The other thing that you do with fish, right, is cooking, obviously. And cooking
Yep.
is present in a lot of cottagecore games, and it's honestly something that I don't engage too much with as a mechanic because I think cooking in general struggles from again having a clear purpose back to anything else. Not to sort of spread too much Spiritfarer love as has been the want of the show for many years, but I think one of the smart things about that game is cooking was not about what your character got out of it, but actually something for the other characters that inhabited the world, and so it made a lot of sense in that respect, and is by far and away the cottagecore game that I have done the most cooking in. And it's always one of those interesting things in relation to fishing, because often, you catch so many different varieties of fish, but when it comes to cooking, it's often like we'll just throw in a fish of whatever and the dish will come out, right? And so you might have all of this complexity about different fish types that you're catching, but ultimately it's kind of like, well, and then out the other end, it's just, a fish, doesn't really matter. Just catch whatever and put in whatever. And I think it's a really hard balance to strike. I don't know what the right answer should be in terms of making cooking or doing something with the fish as interesting. But I can't think of too many games where, outside of donating to a museum, where I've had a really strong connection to what I do with the fish post catching it.
Yeah. Gosh, cooking's a whole topic on its own for sure. Um, because I like cooking in real life, as you said, cooking up the fish is kind of. I love seafood. I love cooking. I love eating fish. Again, growing up on the coast. But yeah, that is hard to emulate, isn't it? Again, I think it's just something you really have to focus on. We need more cooking cottage core games as a side tangent. We could use that, but no, I think I pretty much agree with all your points.
Well, I think that's. I don't know that I have too much else to say about the sort of fishing or fishing mini games generally. Do you have anything else, Kev, before we.
No, I don't think so either. So, are we ready to dive in and
Oh, yeah.
make crown a winner?
And a
Uh,
loser.
oh, I wonder who that will be.
I thought it might be more of a debate, but based on the conversation we've just had, I think we might be on the same page
All
here.
right, all right. Let's start with that. All right, let's start with the negative. What fishing mini games do you hate, dislike, etc.?
Look, I already have one nominee for this category, and it's Stardew Valley. I think the fishing is so
Stardew.
bad.
It's
It's. I never want to do it. I always get forced into doing it. I don't think there is anything particularly redeemable about fishing in that entire game. I just hate it, and I think it's for me it's the worst aspect, right? Because the game mechanic itself is too in depth to kind of like I don't like the fishing in Disney Dreamlight Valley that much, but it's so easy. It's not really that offensive to me. Whereas in Stardew, it's like you have to dedicate days, in-game days, to just fishing in order to progress things. Like it's this thing you have to do. It takes so much time. It's so complicated. It's frustrating to start, and then when you're done, you never want to do it again. And I don't think the things that you do with the fish are in any way interesting enough to warrant it. So for me, it's like the loser in all categories that we just spoke about.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think, but yeah, I mean, we've talked about it, right? One thing I want to mention, I haven't played Stardew in a hot minute, so maybe my memories are off or something like that. But one thing I recall was that it wasn't very clear explaining fishing to you, um, which is a big general gaming no-no for me. Like, make your tutorial or your game mechanics clear or whatever. And then when I finally figured out, and it still sucked, you know. Um, yeah,
Which,
not
which is the worst, right? Because like sometimes things can be complicated or poorly explained because it can be hard to explain things sometimes. And you work it out, and
sure.
you're like, oh, that's fun. But when you work it out, and you're like, wow, it still sucks when I know what I'm supposed to do.
Yep, yep. So yeah, I think okay. So I think it's clear that is the THS worst mini game, fishing mini game. Uh, do you have any other uh ones you're not fond of though?
I mean, it's not one that I want to call out specifically, but I think anything that just sort of falls into the category of press A, get a fish, and it's kind of just tacked on. And I think with game mechanics, right, I want things to be really well edited, everything to have a clear purpose, and so it's just anything where it's sort of tacked on and not really super clear why it's in the game. I think don't just put fishing in games because fishing is in all of the other games, right? So my sort of second runner up, my least favorite is Stardew Valley, and my second runner up is every other game that has, without clear intent, put fishing into their game.
Yeah, no, that's a wide that's definitely a wide spectrum. I'm gonna give a nominate. I agree with you for sure there. I can't like I think they're so bad I can't even remember one right now that like I know they're out there, I've experienced them, but they're just so forgettable, right? Like I can't even think of one that
No, you're exactly right.
yeah.
In every game, like chances are, if you're thinking about why haven't they mentioned X Games, fishing mechanic, it probably falls into the category that we've just talked about because they don't stick in your mind. But if I went back and fired up that game and started playing, I'd be like, oh, that's right, not doing that.
Yeah. Um yeah. I will give another honorable or dishonorable mention, I guess, to Monster Hunter. I forget. Have you ever played Monster Hunter, Johnny? I don't think you have, but
No, not
correct me if I'm
really.
not. Okay. Um, so I love the Monster Hunter games, and fishing is really weird because it it should be better, and I don't mean like like just general like you want every bad thing to be better, but so much of Monster Hunter is gathering materials to craft stuff. That's a big part of the loop, right? And so you'd think fishing would be a good avenue to explore that. But their fishing mini game, I don't even remember what it's like because that's how infrequently you have to do it. I think it's just like an A type Animal Crossing esque type game. I don't even remember. They it's so weird because in a game focused on gathering materials for crafting, they've kind of stomped out fishing. Even though it's there, you don't really have to ever do it, and it's not particularly fun. You don't have any reason or want to do it, which is just awful. Like the total opposite of what I think the what it should be trying to accomplish.
And
So
it sounds like a real missed opportunity because
yeah,
in the context of Monster Hunter, right? Like
yeah.
fishing sounds like a thing where you could put some cool monsters that maybe you need to fish up to get them to appear. And this might really reveal
Ah,
how much I haven't played Monster Hunter, but it feels
hold,
like there's a natural synergy there, right?
hold on. Okay, this is a little tangent. So, Monster Hunter 3, or 3 is try as they called it, was the first one to come out to the West, and or at least the first numbered one, I think. I could be wrong. Well, it's the first one I played. It was on the Wii. Um, one of the earliest ones to come out to the West for sure. Um, now the one of the gimmick, I don't know if call it gimmicks or what, one of the thing angles they were going for is that they introduced underwater monsters in that game. Um, Now, it's notoriously hated, the underwater fights in the series. I am not one of those people. I really enjoyed the underwater fights, but that's a whole nother discussion. But what you described actually happened in 3. There was this big fish called a gobel. It was like a monster anglerfish, basically. And you could use the fishing mechanic to fish it out of the water before you actually started fighting it, and it would flop out and it would, you'd pull it out, it'd fly out and start flopping around and basically be stunned for a few minutes if you did it correctly and letting you get in free hits, which in my opinion is one of the most fun little dumb mechanic things they ever did in the series. And they do a lot of other dumb stuff like that, but I just have really, really fond memories of that. But no, I agree. I wish they would do more stuff like that because there are plenty of fish-like enemies in that. They just don't want you to fish them for whatever reason. Um, but yeah, big missed opportunity. So, shame on you, Monster Hunter. Um, but other than that, are there any other dishonorable mentions you want to mention?
No, I think we can go to let's talk about some winners.
Yeah, the winners. Okay. Um. Okay. I don't even know where to start. Okay, Roots of Pacha is a good one for all the reasons I explained. I've highly for. I mean, this is in general for Roots of Pacha. Like, it's a Stardew clone, very heavily, but a really well done Stardew clone, and that goes for the fishing. Well, first of all, it's not Stardew fishing, so that's already a win, right? But it like I described, it fits the game. The mechanic is a little different from normal. It felt like a real breath of fresh air in this cottage core space that we're in. So props to you, Rutsupasha, for your spear fishing mini game. Very, very enjoyable.
I think the two is interesting for me because when I came into this conversation, I was fully expecting Spiritfarer to be, the game I was thinking about the most, and I absolutely think Spiritfarer should be part of the conversation for best fishing minigame. But through the course of this conversation, I've really talked myself around on Animal Crossing. Like, I was maybe thinking about Animal Crossing as a contender for worst, but I'm now thinking it's a strong contender for best. And it's not because of the mechanics, right? The mechanics are
Right.
what they are. I think
Yeah.
they're flawed. But for everything else that's around the fishing minigame, the breadth of fish, the learning, the museum,
Yep.
the fact that it's a decent moneymaker. I think this is a strong contender for best fishing minigame.
It even has the fishing tourneys, right? Like events to encourage
Yep.
fishing with that mechanic, which when you think about, not a lot of other games, not even cottagecore, just games in general don't do. They don't put a spotlight on fishing like that. And it's just, every now and then, which is, it doesn't overdo it, doesn't overstay its welcome. Um and uh and I think there is an important note here. I think this is part. I mean, I'm agreeing with you fully. Animal Crossing is on my list of winners for sure. Um, I think it's important to note that it's, again, we discussed how fishing games go back, but in terms of fishing mini games, I think Animal Crossing was a very early entry, at least one that became very iconic, right? That became easily recognizable. Um, like, yes, Zelda had fishing before, but when you hear fishing minigame, I think the vast majority of people who play video games will think Animal Crossing as their first thought because it has such a long history and really, I think, influence on the idea of a fishing mini game. Um, and but yeah, no, like you said though, through that long history, they've really honed it and made it wonderful. New Horizons, which I've had many problems with and discussed at length on even on this show. The fishing in the museum, I think, are excellent. And they even introduced the little diving, which is, fishing without a rod, but a fun little flavor change where you go swimming out instead of just standing by the river. So good on you, Animal Crossing.
And to pick up on my second nominee, I think Spiritfarer, for me, it's the perfect combination of the mechanics work really well, strong integration with the game, a good use for fish outside
Yep,
of, the fishing with cooking and the, cooking being relevant for the guests staying on the boat and then wanting
absolutely.
different food. For me, it's probably the most complete implementation of a fishing mini game. I think for me, it personally hits sort of all of the things that I'm looking for.
Absolutely. I fully agree. One minor detail that I think is adds a lot, which actually Spiritfarer is very good at, is through the animations, right?
Oh
Stella
yes,
does the fishing. You feel the weight of the fish because she's leaning in or leaning back or whatever,
yep.
and it's
And it's just one of those things about that game in general. Spiritfarer's animations are top
yep,
notch across the board, and they nail it with
absolutely,
fishing.
absolutely. So definite major props for that.
So
Yeah,
Kev, I have an idea. I have an
okay.
idea. What? Here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, best fishing minigame goes to Spiritfarer. However, we have the most innovative fishing award, which I think is definitely a Roots of Pacha. I was watching some videos in the background of that fishing, and that looks really cool. I really want to try
Right.
that.
Yes. Try it.
And
So
then
good.
most informative fishing minigame award goes to Animal Crossing. How do we feel about that?
I I want to give Animal Crossing the best overall. Um, I think this is clearly a bias thing. As someone who's played Animal Crossing for 20 years or whatever, I keep coming back to it for a reason, right? Like Spiritfarer, like I agree, everything about it, as you said, it's done well. Every part of it is really polished and done well, and enjoyable. And yes, Animal Crossing is the Pavlov button, it's a slot machine, but there's
It's a really good
lots
slot
it's a
machine.
really good slot machine, right? There
Yeah.
there is a reason that mechanic has remained pretty much unchanged for 20 years and still enjoyable. I
No,
still like
I think I'm with you. I think I'm with you. As much as I love the Spiritfarer implementation, it's just not going to stick the same way that that Animal Crossing fishing minigame. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think we do have to give the best fishing minigame award to Animal Crossing.
well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Um King of Fish yeah, Prince I was trying to think of Prince of something, but whatever, King of Fishing mini games goes to Animal Crossing.
And I am shocked. Like coming into this conversation, I was fully expecting to be putting that near the bottom, and somehow we've come out with it being
It's the
the best.
top.
And I'm not mad about it. I'm not mad
No,
about
that's
it.
because that's because I'm here. I was ready to fight for that. Yeah, no, it's like it's it's hard to be objective. I mean, right? Because it's. I mean, it's not objective. This is all clear. Well, all
Kev,
clearly
it might be
subjective,
hard for
right?
you to be objective, but my views are always objective. So if we've said
There
Animal
you go.
Crossing is the best fishing minigame, that is
Yep.
objectively true.
There
It is
you
now a
go.
fact. We can put it on Wikipedia or wherever
Yep.
facts are based these days.
Yep. It's in the books, folks. Yeah, no. Yeah. I think, yeah, without a doubt, it goes to Animal Crossing. I'm gonna give some other honorable mentions. They definitely weren't near the top, but Pokemon actually, like, it's you don't think about it, but
Boo. Worst.
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 It's
That should have been one of my nominees for worst. Pokemon fishing is so boring. Sorry.
No,
Keep
no,
going. Keep going with your love for
I agree.
it.
I'm torn because I agree with you. When I think of the fishing, like I don't, I'm not necessarily looking forward to it, but I like fishing up a new Pokemon or fighting the Pokemon that you fish up. I think that's a novel idea. I don't think Pokemon has the best implementation. I'll agree with you. Yeah, well, I guess like a lot of things in Pokemon, right? They really need to update that. But it's something that is worth thinking about. Not a lot of other games do that. I wish they did. There's more that should be done with it. Actually, again, this might be going further into the proper fishing simulation, but just not just pulling it up, doing something with your fish is, or having to fight a little more than just with the rod is an interesting thought. And there's been better fishing than others. The one in XY wasn't that bad. The ones in the others not as great though. But like I said earlier, another honorable mention, as I mentioned earlier, Sonic Frontiers. Um, as much of a joke as Big the Cat is in that series and outside that series, somehow they made me look forward to seeing Big the Cat because the fishing was fun and it actually had a purpose. The more you fished up, basically Big would give you this currency that let you skip other, not necessarily skip, but it would give you currency you could spend to clear objectives instead of doing levels. It was an alternate way to clear some objectives, which I think is a really interesting idea in a Sonic game. Um, so yeah, shout out to Sonic Frontiers. Are there any others you want to mention off the top of your head?
I had one, and it totally walked out of my brain. So I feel like that might be a sign that we need to we need to call it. There's a lot of fishing mini games that we've covered.
Yep. All right. There's a lot more for sure. Send us some comments, folks. Let us know what some of your favorite fishing or mini games or memories or even fish, right? Like, I mean, it's hard to beat the ocean sunfish and Animal Crossing, but there's another fish you enjoy in a game, let us know.
Let us know if you agree with our list as well. Do you agree that Animal Crossing is the best fishing minigame and that Stardew Valley is the worst?
I mean, we said it's objective, so it's not really agreeing. It's just, we're right.
Yeah, we want to know if any of our listeners are out there are wrong.
All right, and you can let us know on Twitter at THSPod, or you can let Al specifically know at the Scott Bot. Let him know personally he wasn't part of this discussion at all, but blame him anyways. His name's on the as the host overall, the creator, whatever.
He is responsible for everything that we say.
He really is. You can also find him at mastodon.scott. I still haven't touched Mastodon. It still feels like Twitter at home, but I could be wrong. Um, but aside from that, you can also leave more feedback at harvestseason.club, where you should also be able to find the uh links to stuff. Well, we didn't talk about that much, but at least that article we've been referencing. You can find other episodes, of course. You can find well, I'm trying to think here. You can provide feedback there. I think I said that. You can also go to patreon.com/thspod where you can give Al money to gain access to cool stuff. Well, first of all, you support the show, which in itself is we greatly, greatly appreciate. But in exchange, you will get some cool stuff like access to our Slack, where you can leave feedback and bother Al personally. That Slack is growing and growing, and I love it. I laugh so much in there. And you can also get access to the Greenhouse, the premium Patreon exclusive podcast about things that aren't cottagecore or whatever. There's a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know when this is coming out. I'm pulling the curtain back. A Nintendo Direct just aired, so there will be a greenhouse on that at some point. Because boy, that was a good Direct. Um. But anyways, so yeah, find us on Twitter, on harvestseason.club, on Patreon. Um. What about you, Johnny? Anywhere you want people to find you, or are you just gonna keep hiding? in the Slack on the
I'm gonna keep
Patreon.
hiding, and you gotta pay to talk to me. Gotta join the Slack.
There you go. You can find me, Kevin, at Cooper Prez on Twitter, where I mostly retweet other funnier people or interesting things. Or you can go to my actually now active again art Twitter. Was it at Sprider Squared, where I do a lot of pixel art things. Full disclosure, I've recently become unemployed due to not my own fault. I didn't get fired; it was a layoff. So I have had more time to do art. Um, so you can go look at that. But other than that, thank you, listeners, for uh braving these new waters, uncharted waters with us. Thank you, Johnny, for
And
joining me.
stay tuned for the rest of the month because there's a whole bunch more
Yes.
fishing content coming, including a look at Dredge, which is a excellent fishing based game.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't played it yet, but boy, do I know about it. It's excellent. Boy, if you didn't like the cozy fishing, tune into Dredge so you can hear about the abominations that we fish up there. Um, yeah, good times. But until next time, dear listeners, have a good
Have a
haul.
good haul.
Yeah, it's not as long. We'll work on it.
No.
Have a good. Take care, everyone.
The Harvest Season is created by Al McKinley, with support from our patrons, including our pro farmers, Kevin, Stuart, and Elisa. Our art is done by Micah the Brave, and our music is done by Nick Burgess. Feel free to visit our website, harvestseason.club, for show notes and links to things we discussed in this episode.
I also have no idea what Big the Cat even is. I just don't know anything about Sonic. So you're like talking about Big the Cat, and I'm like, I don't even know how to respond to that.